Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Cassie, as you guys know, and today I will be doing a try not to laugh challenge. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Guys, I think there might be a ghost in here. Beloved? Well, if this isn't a sign, I don't know what is. And I don't want to get haunted, so change of plans. Today, we will be doing a book review on Beloved. Just a little bit of background on this book. Beloved is a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by highly acclaimed author Toni Morrison. So, this book to me earned a 5-star rating. But what does that mean? And how did Toni Morrison achieve this very high acclaim? To me, a 5-star rating means that the book contains complex, multi-dimensional characters with well-thought-out backstories and development over time. This also means that the plot is engaging and conveys important themes, and it's well-written, with creative and sophisticated wording and good use of figurative language and literary devices. And finally, the writing allows the reader to resonate and connect emotionally with the characters. So this book takes place in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a house called 124, which is inhabited by Sethe, a former slave who managed to run away and escape while pregnant with her now 18-year-old daughter, Denver, who also lives in 124. Quickly, we learn that 124 contains a lot of history. Formerly, Sethe's mother-in-law, Baby Suggs, lived there along with her 2 sons, Howard and Bugler. But we learn that Howard and Bugler ran away, and soon thereafter, Baby Suggs died. These departures did not leave Sethe in Denver alone. 124 was also inhabited by a spiteful spirit, that of Sethe's dead daughter, who perished when she was just a baby at Sethe's own hands. One day, Paul D. arrives, a man from Sweet Home, the plantation that Sethe escaped from. Upon his arrival, Paul D. is quickly made aware of the ghost that inhabits 124. He grapples with the spirit and seemingly banishes it, much to the chagrin of Denver, who considered this ghost her companion, and they discover a young woman sopping wet at their doorstep, who claims to be called Beloved. Coincidentally, the name also inscribed on the tomb of Sethe's dead daughter. They decide to take in Beloved, who remembers nothing of her childhood. Beloved quickly becomes attached and almost obsessed with Sethe, especially her past and life on Sweet Home. Beloved grows increasingly more resentful towards Paul D because of his relationship with Sethe, and manipulates him and seduces him until he leaves the house. Denver also forms an obsessive attachment towards Beloved, who she believes is the re-embodied form of her long-deceased sister. Throughout this book, there are frequent flashbacks to the past, including one of Sethe's escape from Sweet Home. She makes it safely to 124, where she lives with Baby Suggs for only 28 days, before schoolteacher, the owner of Sweet Home, comes to retrieve her. When Sethe realizes schoolteacher's intentions, she decides that death is a better fate than subjecting her children to the horrors of slavery. So she attempts to kill Howard and Bugler and successfully kills Crawling Already, or Beloved. When Paul D discovers Sethe's infanticide, he leaves her. Soon afterwards, Sethe realizes that Beloved is the embodiment of her long-deceased child and becomes obsessed and enthralled with her. Beloved becomes increasingly more toxic and abusive towards Sethe, and the two, completely engrossed in each other, basically neglect Denver. Denver soon realizes she must fend for herself in order to save her mother, and reaches out to the women of the community in order to rid 124 of Beloved. The women gather outside of 124 and are able to banish Beloved and save Sethe. For a while after, Sethe becomes extremely depressed, but Paul D reaches out to her and helps her discover her worth. So you guys already know that I gave this book a 5, but I really want to stress that I loved this book. Like, I could not put it down. Like, it was one of those books where you're reading and next thing you know, it's 2 a.m. and you didn't even realize it. So let me explain to you guys why. I kind of want to start off with the first third of the book, because I believe that this part is where a lot of people kind of got lost. They kind of gave up on the book. And I will admit the language can be very confusing. But I think that's one of the things that I appreciated the most about this book. Like, going into that first third, realizing that this was something I had to dedicate time to really understand. It made the experience all the more meaningful, because as you're walking through these characters, as you're reliving their memories, reliving their trauma, you kind of have to piece it apart. It's not laid out for you. You need to spend time with the book. You need to reread. You kind of need to untangle, because it's really such an intricate and well-woven story that, like, you really need to sit with it. So that's something that I actually appreciated a lot. And that's why my rating remained a 5 throughout the entire book. Because, even though it may have started out kind of all over the place, jumping from present time to flashback, it really kept me going. So from the first of the book, one scene that really stuck with me is the scenes between Sethe and Amy Denver. I thought they were really beautiful, and I thought their dynamic especially was super meaningful. But specifically, one part of the text I want to kind of dive into is when Amy is taking care of Denver.
Sethe.
She's, kind of trying to tend to her wounds, and she sees her back, which, as we know from reading the book, is very scarred from being whipped by a school teacher. But the way she describes it was so, touching to me. She said, "It's a tree, Lou, a choke cherry tree. See, here's the trunk. It's red and split wide open, full of slap." I felt like in this moment, really of need for
Sethe.
Denver, to have somebody just, take her pain and describe it as something so beautiful was it just was so touching to me. So I want to take a second and appreciate this stylistic choice of Toni Morrison. She really takes a lot of these gruesome topics and, frames them in such beautiful language. Not only this, but also the lynching that she described at Sweet Home, and also Paul D's experiences, which I'm going to talk about more later. All of these are instances where you're so caught up with, her poetic language, you can almost miss what she's referring to. But when you reread, it's all the more heartbreaking because of just the visualization that she provides you with. Something else I want to talk about that was so important to my rating and so important in this book, I think, is her development of the characters. Not one character in this book was left unfinished to me. Everyone got fleshed out at some point. You dive deep into each of these characters' perspectives and, the way that they perceive the other characters, the way that they affect them. And I think that's also a really beautiful stylistic choice on Morrison's part because, even though some characters wronged the others, like Paul D leaving Sethe, or even Beloved, which, by the end was doing some pretty horrific things, because of the narrative that she provides for everybody, you just end up being kind of heartbroken, for everybody, just feeling that kind of empathy for their circumstances, what caused them to go on that journey, what is causing them to make those choices. And you really can't blame anyone, you can't hate anyone, which I think makes it kind of a difficult read at some points, but it is something important to the heavy topic that it's dealing with. So to me personally, I think one of the most profound moments in the book is going into Paul D's past. And there was specifically a paragraph here which just I really had to sit with because I felt like it kind of encapsulated a big part of this book's overall message. Singing love songs to Mr. Death, they smashed his head. More than the rest, they killed the flirt whom folks called life for leading them on, making them think the next sunrise could be worth it, that another stroke of time would do it at last. So this moment is obviously from when Paul D is imprisoned, and he's talking about kind of the anguish that he's experiencing, but also just, I think it really does speak overall. When he talks about the flirt they call life, something so unobtainable, being born into these circumstances, it really puts you into the perspective of having your very birthright revoked from you. And I think what he talks about, being born into a world where you're not truly allowed to live, your very existence is owned by someone else, that to me was so far out of the realm of my imagination and my circumstances. So I really wanted to applaud Toni Morrison for, even being able to vocalize that anger that comes from living his life. And then finally, I want to talk about this last part of the book. So at this point in the story, everybody's kind of reached their own closure. Beloved has been relinquished from the house. And to me, at first, this felt a little unsatisfying. At the end of the story, when it jumps back to Beloved's perspective, she says, "So they forgot her, like an unpleasant dream during troubling sleep." And I thought this was a little strange because Sethe and Denver, they both loved and knew her for a time. This was their sister, their daughter, and they just forgot her. So because of this, after finishing the story, I jumped back to the author's note to see if it could give me a new perspective. And Morrison says that the Herculean effort to forget would be threatened by memory desperate to stay alive. And to me, this is what Beloved represents, who Morrison also describes as the figure most central to the story would have to be her, the one who lost everything. So I think this ending is really a testimony to the victims of slavery, the ones who were forgotten, the ones who were killed and lost everything and, slipped away to time. And That's why, even though to me initially it felt unsatisfying, it's really truthful.